Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include arrests and legal action taken against game hackers, Blizzard being threatened with jail time over loot boxes, some exciting action RPG news, and more. Feel free to check out last week's episode and make sure to ring the sub notification bell to make Diablo 4 release one day sooner. In our first story, we'll talk a bit about God of War. The new hit game sold over 3.1 million units within its first 3 days, according to a tweet from the official PlayStation Twitter. This makes it the fastest selling PS4 exclusive ever. And given the game seems to have been met with universal acclaim, it's no surprise why. And clearly the reason is that Teal'c is the voice of Kratos. Now, I don't have a PS4, but I turn the question to you folks, those of you who have played the game. Does it live up to the hype? Were you disappointed? Tell me about the game. And as you're typing that out, we'll move on to our next story, which is actually a number of stories put together. There just seems to be a lot of game hackers that are being arrested or sued. Legal action is being taken against them across a number of titles. In one story, we've got the PUBG developers posting on Steam, talking about 15 suspects that were arrested. They were, quote, developing hack programs, hosting marketplaces for hack programs, and brokering transactions. The suspects are currently facing a fine of the equivalent of roughly 5.1 million US dollars, and it was further proven that not only were these hack developers developing cheats to screw over the company that made the game, but that their hacking tools that they let people download contained Trojan viruses and other similar malware that would steal a user's data. The icing on the cake here is that these arrests were made in China. And for the longest time, there was this belief, this myth even, that China was untouchable, that people could make all the bots and hacks and cheats that they wanted in China and never face legal consequence. Well, it looks like the local authorities are complying and helping out in these investigations. Our next story comes out of South Korea, and this one has to do with Overwatch hackers. As reported by Unicron, 13 Overwatch hackers were arrested back in January, and punishments are now finally starting to roll out.
Autobots, transform and roll out!
The first of which is 2 years probation to one of the unnamed suspects. He's not going to see jail time unless he violates the terms of his parole. Another of the 13 also received his punishment in the form of roughly $10,000 worth of fines, and the other 11 are still under investigation by the South Korean prosecutor's office. However, what's on the table as a possible punishment is up to 5 years of jail time and a max of about 43,000 US dollars in fines. And then our third story is about Epic Games pursuing a 14-year-old with legal action over hacking in Fortnite. Now, this all started back in October when Epic first put forth the lawsuit. At the time, they didn't know the age of the individual, but before they took this legal action, he was banned from Epic services 14 times for hacking. The defendant, quote, operates at least 2 YouTube channels where he actively promotes, distributes, and induces others to use cheat software. And in a sample video, quote, the defendant demonstrated his use of the cheat to unlawfully modify the Fortnite game code, instructed viewers as to how to use the cheat in the same way, and provided viewers with a link to a location from which they could acquire the cheat for their own use.
The cheat is grounded.
Now, this kid is facing a penalty of up to $150,000, which obviously would fall to his parents to pay off. Now, the kid's mom wrote a letter to the judge trying to have the case dismissed, and citing, among other reasons, that the game's terms of service require parental consent for minors to play, and she never gave that consent. Therefore, the terms of service, the EULA, which is the entire foundation around which Epic is taking legal action against this individual, does not apply to her son. He could not legally have consented to it. Now, I want to turn the question to you folks. What are your thoughts on all these stories? Are you happy to see that people that are developing hacks are getting arrested, are facing fines, are facing jail time? Do you think jail time is too much? Do you think this 14-year-old should just be dismissed as boys shall be boys, or do you feel that after getting banned for 14 times, he kind of realizes he's doing something wrong. On to our next topic, loot boxes. Now, we recently spoke about how the Netherlands declared loot boxes gambling and therefore illegal. Well, the latest is that Belgium has also ruled this way. And according to the Belgian Gaming Commission, they've determined that FIFA 18, Overwatch, and CSGO's loot boxes are a game of chance and so are subject to Belgian gambling law. A statement from the Belgian Minister of Justice said that these 3 games were therefore illegal, and he demanded that their loot boxes be removed. Otherwise, the devs, quote, risk a prison sentence of up to 5 years and a fine of up to 800,000 euros. And he further added that where minors are involved, those punishments can be doubled. Now, it was back in late 2017 that the whole Star Wars Battlefront debacle led to the chain of events that resulted in what we're seeing today. And the question I turn to you folks is, do you think that things have gone too far? Do you think that Blizzard devs being threatened with jail time, I don't know how that would work, do you think that's going too far for having loot boxes in Overwatch? On to some Path of Exile news. The devs have posted another blog post about their upcoming skill revamp. They spoke about the Vol skills. They're going to be reworking the core mechanics of the Vol skill gems, and the biggest thing is probably that the Vol skill gems will now also grant the normal version of the skill. Plus, there will be lots of changes as to how you gain Vol souls. There's a lot more details to go over. If you're interested, I'll drop a link in the video description, but overall it seems like great changes to Vol skills. The devs further went on to make an entire post talking about changes coming to Ignite in 3.3.0. Huge buffs, huge improvements are coming to the Ignite mechanic, which means a big buff to the Elementalist. In other Path of Exile news, Neversink has released a new version of his loot filter, Filterblade, his item filter that, in my opinion, is an indispensable tool for Path of Exile. If you're a PoE player, you probably already know what that is, but if you're new to the game and you don't know what a loot filter is, basically there are so many drops in Path of Exile, and a loot filter will help categorize them for you. Things that are more important will be bigger, or they'll be more visible in some way, and some items won't even appear at all. In other words, if an item is considered too low class to be worth anything at all, then you won't even see the name appear on your screen. It'll reduce screen clutter, and the great thing about the filter is that there's a lot of settings onto how strict you want it to be. If you like to pick up more things, you can set the filter very low, but if you want to only see the absolute best stuff, you don't want your time wasted at all, you can put the filter strictness very high. Now, also this week we saw the release of a small patch for Path of Exile. With it came a bunch of bug fixes and some corrections of unintended behavior. And as a reminder, the flashback event is starting today. And I just want to end our Path of Exile segment by highlighting a cool thing in the world of Path of Exile. This is a statue created by Eric Matt. He sculpted it in ZBrush, then he 3D printed it, then he molded and cast it, and finally painted it, and it just looks absolutely spectacular. And the 3 recognizable items that you can see in here are Atsiri's Disfavor, Devoto's Devotion, and Calm's Heart. On to some quick news about Wolcen. This is an upcoming action RPG game that we've covered a little bit. It's been in alpha for a very long time, and people have been concerned about, is this game ever going to release? Well, they've just made their beta announcement. Toward the end of September, Wolcen will be entering beta. They released a very impressive beta teaser video, and with the beta will finally come multiplayer. Will come the apocalyptic form, one of the major features of Wolcen. We'll get an entire new storyline for Act 1, and there's tons of other new stuff and improvements. Now, they stated that their full focus will be developing the beta, so we can expect no further patches until September. And one feature that they've decided to drop is the rotating camera view. Based on feedback, they found that at best, most people don't use it, and at worst, it was confusing and disorienting. And on their end, developing the game around having the rotating camera means a lot of extra work on their part, because they have to make sure that the game looks good and is fully bug tested for the full 360-degree rotation. So by removing this feature, they're going to save a lot of time that they can devote towards other things. In other action RPG news, Last Epoch, which is currently on Kickstarter about halfway through, had a special race event this week. It was a fun streamed event to promote the game. Basically, they handed out rewards to the first 3 people to reach level 50. I believe it took a little over an hour for first place to be secured, and then second and third were about 20 minutes after first place. Be sure to check out my video on last Epoch. In other action RPG news, David Brevik, aka one of the fathers of Diablo, did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit recently. Now he's currently working on a game called It Lurks Below, a game he's fully developing himself. Everything from the art, the music, the programming, every little thing is made solely by him. The game is currently on Steam Early Access, and he describes the game as Starbound/Terraria crossed with Diablo. It has the graphics and perspective similar to Starbound or Terraria, but it has the items, RPG elements, classes, and game mechanics of Diablo. In the Ask Me Anything, Brevik was asked what were some of Diablo 2's biggest flaws, and what would he do differently, to which he replied that he didn't like the stamina system, he wished he hadn't included it, and that if he could go back, he wishes he could have implemented instanced loot. In other words, you see your loot, I see mine, like in Diablo 3. You don't have to fight each other over who grabs it. He was asked what he thought was the biggest failure of Marvel Heroes, to which he replied, I think the pressure of having it be free to play was tough. I don't know if it would have been better to sell a box product or not, and we'll never know. He was asked what was the biggest drawback of working for Blizzard, to which he replied, it is hard to stay grounded when working for Blizzard. Having that much success can really screw with your mind. I loved working there, and someday maybe we will work together. It was really good for me to leave, however, and take the journey I have taken. He was asked what he was most dissatisfied about with Diablo 3, and he replied, most of the stuff was changed, I think it's a good game now. He later on added, quote, I think the game became quite good after the expansion. He also later mentioned that he is still currently working as a consultant for Path of Exile, helping them with the game in the China region. There was some speculation as to whether or not he was still in his consultant role, so that confirms that yes, he still currently is. Now last year I got to interview David Brevik and we spoke all about Diablo 2, Diablo 3, Diablo 4, and action RPGs in general. If you have not seen that video series, I encourage you to check it out. On to Diablo news. A new patch released this week with no visible changes. Community manager Nevelistus said that it was, quote, just minor behind the scenes stuff. And it seems that minor behind the scenes stuff was to thwart cheaters. People soon realized that they were moving up on the leaderboards. It seemed that botters were being removed. Furthermore, as of this patch, the popular bot, ROS bot, stopped working entirely, as well as TurboHUD, a popular map overlay. On Wednesday, the maker of TurboHUD said, quote, they obfuscated the area of the players, so HUD does not work right now, I need more time. And basically it seems that that patch encrypted a lot more stuff, making it more difficult for the bot makers, for the cheat makers to gain access to the information that they need. As of the time of this recording, ROS bot and TurboHUD are still not working, but that of course could rapidly change. There was another patch that released on console that, apart from fixing some bugs, finally brought the Battlecruiser pet to PS4 and Xbox One. A quick update on Diablo job postings. 3 job postings have been removed and 1 has been added. Rigging Artist Temp, Senior Technical Artist Environment, and Software Engineer Live Ops are all listings that have vanished, i.e. most likely been filled. And then a new position for Technical Artist has emerged. It seems like they're building up a sizable team on Diablo, undoubtedly to work on their new Diablo game. And I'd like to end the Diablo portion of the news with a cool thing in the world of Diablo. This 3D hand-painted model of the Butcher by Joker Y. He calls this a low poly model, and I suppose you can say it's low poly, but the paint job is so fantastic that it's hard to tell. On to Overwatch news. We got a lot more details on the upcoming Symmetra rework. She will no longer be classified as a support hero. She's getting lumped into the defense category, which is something that players have felt since day one. Big changes are coming to her turrets. Now she'll only be able to have 3 turrets up at any time. However, their health is being increased from 1 to 30. They do more damage, and she can now throw them to deploy them. They'll fly through the air in a straight line like a Pharaoh rocket before attaching to something and deploying. Her primary fire will no longer lock on. It'll still be a beam, but it won't have that tendency to attach itself to players, which is very frustrating on the receiving end. There'll be some buffs to her secondary fire, and her teleport is now going to become her E ability, with significant changes to it. And now her photon barrier is becoming her ult. It'll be stationary, enormous, and have 5,000 health. And her shield generator is going away entirely. This week also saw a new patch for Overwatch. It introduced a lot of the balance changes that we've previously discussed. The Lucio buffs came through, mostly with respect to his wall riding. Tracer ult damage has been nerfed. We got some Junkrat nerfs. We got a nerf to Brigitte's shield bash radius, a nerf to Genji's deflect. The major Hanzo rework is now live, as well as the new Rialto map. I'll drop a link in the video description for the full details. Now this week we also got a PTR go up. Most notably, we've got more nerfs to Brigitte. Her ult doesn't give as much armor anymore, and the devs would further like to nerf Shield Bash by adding a second to its cooldown. But a huge buff came through for Ana. If her bullet strikes a teammate that is already at full health, it'll simply pass through that teammate. And the devs are further considering increasing her magazine size from 10 to 14. But really though, the ability for her bullets to pass through full health teammates is huge. That means no more wasted shots because someone happened to get in the way of your bullet. Yeah, maybe you won't always hit the intended target, but at least you're always healing a bit or damaging a bit. And that's gonna wrap up this week's video. Do remember to leave a comment with your thoughts on any and every story that we've covered. And if you have an idea for a story you'd like to see us cover in an upcoming episode, head on over to the subreddit and leave a link. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can pledge on Patreon, where we have a number of backer rewards, including monthly Q&A, virtual hangouts, behind the scenes stuff, and more. We're trying to reach 300 Patreon supporters. Even $1 helps. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.